Last night, the world quietly shared the same sky, but no one saw the same moon. This recording is a slowly shifting and carefully preserved archival observation. It comes from classified documentation known as MW47b lunar divergence. At 2241, the Tokyo National Observatory recorded a quiet but unusual shift in the moon's position. Its surface appeared to move slowly sideways, clear enough to be noticed with the naked eye. No standard orbital model can account for this gentle but persistent displacement. Within a short moment, thousands of independent observers confirmed the exact same drifting moon. In Berlin, the entire surface of the moon began to change in a slow and almost delicate way. Every familiar crater quietly faded, leaving a smooth and pale porcelain-like sphere in the sky. This was not a visual illusion. Carefully preserved raw observations confirmed the transformation with complete clarity. In Paris, observers reported a calm but deeply unusual sight in the night sky. The moon appeared in two soft and overlapping positions, as if its presence were gently divided across the air. Cameras detected what looked like two separate light sources, yet precise measurements showed only one single object. It was not a pair of moons. It was one moon, quietly split between two nearby layers of reality. In New York, observers noticed a slow and unsettling collapse forming near the center of the moon. Its bright surface bent inward with a fragile and uneven motion, almost like a thin sheet of glass folding quietly into itself. This unusual behavior did not match any familiar model of mass or gravity. It appeared to be a subtle disruption in the deeper structure of reality itself. In Moscow, witnesses saw the moon collapse into a single narrow line of light across the night sky. Its usual glow was reduced to a thin beam, as if the entire surface had been drawn tightly along one axis. No known natural process can condense light in such a focused and silent way. Measurements confirmed that the moon's illumination had shifted into an unusually concentrated pattern. NASA engineers attempted to gather every moon recording from around the world into a single synchronized grid, but each data stream showed a different version of the lunar surface, all captured at the exact same moment in time. Some recordings showed a simple and bright shape, while others revealed small details that changed from one frame to the next. There were also feeds where the moon appeared faint and difficult to interpret, as if its light had dropped in strength for only a brief moment. The system couldn't decide which of these conflicting images represented the real moon, and the analytical software began to fail under the contradictions. As the conflicting moon recordings continued to arrive, the grid became gradually more unstable. The software attempted to compare every new frame, but the differences became increasingly complex and impossible to reconcile. Timestamps still aligned perfectly, yet images disagreed in nearly every visible feature, creating additional inconsistencies with each update. The system issued repeated warning messages as more data channels failed to maintain even a brief form of synchronization. Within a short period, the entire grid experienced a broader failure, leaving NASA with no stable reference for what the moon actually looked like at that moment. When the incoming data was transferred onto the global monitoring map, large red zones began to appear across multiple regions. Each marked area represented a location where the moon was recorded in a completely different form from the surrounding observations. Reports from Asia indicated that the moon looked slightly shifted from its expected position. Across Europe, several stations noted small changes in the surface pattern that were not present in earlier frames. In the Americas, observers described short periods when the center of the moon appeared less stable and harder to read. No geographic pattern could explain these variations, and the inconsistencies continued to grow. As more reports were added to the global map, the pattern became even harder to interpret. The differences between regions did not follow any known atmospheric or astronomical model, and no shared factor connected observations. Some research teams attempted to adjust their instruments, but the updated readings showed the same unexplained variations. Other stations compared older recordings, only to find that the earlier data offered no useful reference for what was happening now. With every passing minute, the inconsistencies increased, creating a map filled with signals that contradicted one another. By this point, the global network could no longer provide a unified view of the moon. The archive footage did not only contain images of the sky, it also included several recordings from inside an underground research facility. In one corridor, the electrical system showed irregular fluctuations with brief drops in power that were recorded by the monitoring instruments. The camera feed also displayed small inconsistencies in exposure, suggesting a temporary change in the environment rather than a fault in the equipment. Environmental readings showed minor shifts in the conditions, even though nothing visible was happening in the corridor at the time. All of these measurements occurred at the exact moment the lunar collapse was documented. The corridor recordings led to a secured chamber located deeper inside the facility. At the center of the room stood a reinforced glass cylinder connected to several monitoring devices. Inside the cylinder was a concentrated form of light that did not remain stable for long. Its brightness rose and fell in a smooth but irregular cycle, creating patterns that the instruments recorded in real time. Researchers noted that the changes did not resemble any known electrical or thermal behavior. The reading suggested that the light was responding to a source outside the chamber, though nothing in the room indicated what that source could be. As the observation continued, the light inside the cylinder began to shift in a calm and steady motion. Its movements rose and settled in slow intervals that repeated with quiet consistency. The instruments recorded gentle changes in the light, forming a pattern that the researchers monitored closely. The measurements showed light behavior that did not resemble any known electrical or thermal response. Researchers inspected every part of the chamber, but all equipment readings remained normal. Each shift in the light occurred at the same moment as the anomalies in the sky, indicating a clear connection between the two events. As the recording continued, the light inside the chamber gathered into a more defined shape. Its outline shifted from a faint glow into a clearer form that remained stable for several seconds. The movement of the light stayed calm and steady, changing only in small simple motions that were easy for the instruments to track. Researchers noticed that the readings grew more regular, suggesting that the phenomenon was entering a new stage in its behavior. The light inside the chamber began to move with slightly stronger motion, rising and fading in a slow and steady rhythm. Its shape changed more often now, with brief moments where the form stretched or narrowed before settling again. The monitoring devices recorded these changes clearly, showing activity that was increasing at a controlled pace. Researchers noted that the behavior suggested a shift into a more active stage, even though the cause remained unknown. The light continued to shift with growing intensity, holding its shape for longer moments before changing again. At times it formed outlines that were briefly recognizable, as if the structure was becoming more stable with each movement. The instruments registered continuous activity, showing clear signs that the phenomenon had reached a higher level of motion. Researchers observed that the pace of these changes was increasing, suggesting that the event was approaching a critical moment in its development. After the changes in the chamber grew stronger, the equipment in the room began to show irregular activity. The camera feed shifted slightly, with brief moments where the image softened before returning to normal. Lights along the walls dimmed and brightened in short intervals, reacting in a way that did not match any known mechanical pattern. Researchers noted that these effects appeared without warning, suggesting that the entire room was being influenced by the phenomenon in a subtle but steady way. The longer the recording continued, the more the room reacted in small but noticeable ways. Several cameras showed short drops in clarity, as if the image was being pulled out of focus for a moment before returning to normal. Control panels along the walls displayed shifting values, with numbers rising and falling in steady cycles. Researchers confirmed that none of the equipment was malfunctioning, and that the changes were appearing only while the phenomenon in the chamber remained active. All systems in the room began shifting together, rising and dropping in the same steady rhythm. Lights around the chamber moved in brief pulses, showing the event at its peak. Researchers noted that this was the final moment before the phenomenon changed form. Hours after the anomaly spread worldwide, a restricted meeting was held between several global leaders. The room was kept dark, and all visual feeds were filtered to hide the identities of the participants. Only a few lines of text were allowed to appear on the display during the briefing. The discussion audio was removed from the file, but the movement of the participants suggested a tense exchange. Several documents were shared across the table, each containing conflicting reports of how the moon had appeared in different regions. No two accounts described the same event. The only message left visible on the display was a brief directive. Lunar event, level Omega. It carried the highest classification available, used only for events that posed a direct risk to global stability. No additional material from the meeting was ever released, and the briefing ended without further explanation. The emergency broadcast appeared without warning, showing a dim room lit only by a failing monitor. A brief message flashed across the screen, stating that the lunar data stream had become unstable. Moments later, the feed shifted into a series of distorted frames, suggesting that the signal was collapsing faster than expected. As the distortion intensified, the audio feed began cutting in and out, leaving only short bursts of static behind. A series of warning icons flashed across the monitor, signaling that the system was rapidly losing stability. Moments later, the display faded to black, confirming that all communication with the lunar network had been lost. Every data stream from the moon was routed into the main control room, but none of the images aligned. Each monitor showed a different lunar form, as if the moon existed in several overlapping states at once. The timestamps drifted in small increments, creating patterns that no synchronization system could interpret. As the desynchronization increased, the light patterns from each feed began shifting in ways that no system could predict. Several channels broke into soft static, while others showed brief flashes where the moon's shape seemed to bend or blur. The technicians attempted to isolate a stable signal, but each model they tried failed to produce a consistent result. After a final wave of interference, the screens displayed one last message: lunar signal lost. No additional data appeared after that point. At 11:30, all telescopes tracking the moon reported a sudden loss of visibility. The blackout occurred almost simultaneously across multiple observation networks, leaving researchers without any usable data. During the outage, the moon produced no measurable light, creating the appearance of a completely dark sphere suspended against the sky. Some instruments detected faint fluctuations in background radiation, but none was strong enough to reveal a clear pattern. When the moon became visible again, its surface no longer matched any previous observation. Several crater positions appeared slightly shifted, and familiar patterns along the limb looked stretched or uneven. Different observatories attempted to compare their recordings, but none of the data sets aligned with one another. Researchers began to suspect that each region of the world was seeing a subtly different version of the same object. As the analysis continued, researchers noticed that the variations between recordings were following a subtle structure. Each data stream showed slight shifts that resembled layered points of view, as if the space around the moon was sliding between nearby positions. The effect produced patterns that could not be explained through optics or mechanical error, suggesting that the distortion was occurring at a deeper level. As the analysts expanded the comparison models, a pattern began to take shape. The differences between each recording were small but undeniably coordinated. As if the moon was being seen through several overlapping viewpoints, every attempt to align the data only created more contradictions, suggesting that the recordings were not failing but instead were capturing different versions of the same moment. During the extended review, the team noticed a timing pattern that did not match across the network. Each recording showed the shift at a slightly different moment, creating a small delay that moved steadily from one station to the next. The signals were close to each other, but never perfectly aligned, as if the event reached every location at a slightly different pace. The effect was too steady to be random, suggesting that the phenomenon did not unfold in the same way for every observer. When the display switched to the full lunar feed, the distortion became much clearer. Large areas of the surface drifted slowly out of place, breaking into layers that moved in separate directions. Some sections faded as the image lost stability, while others became sharper, as if the structure was trying to return to a stable form. Beside it, the global activity map showed matching signals from several regions, suggesting that the disturbance was spreading through more than one system at the same time. In the last section of the archive, the shifting forms on the lunar surface slowed and then stopped entirely. The image settled into a shape that looked almost familiar, though several features remained slightly displaced, as if borrowed from another version of the sky. There were no faults in the equipment, no errors in the data stream. The reading simply eased back into alignment, moving toward a pattern that our system could interpret again. This behavior did not suggest a change within the moon, but a shift in the place from which we were observing it. For a brief moment, our position in reality slipped, and we looked at a version of the moon that did not belong to us. MMW47. B ends without a formal conclusion, but the implication is unmistakable. The moon did not change that night, we did.